sound of praise. Amen.
Over the last little while, we've been talking about King Saul. And we were talking about him and all that stuff. And we went from the message on him going to what started last week called God's heart quest. And how that God is on a quest for hearts. He's looking for hearts. And I'll point that out here just a little bit later on in the message, or just very shortly, about this. But again, just to help you understand, sometimes we need to see things through biblical eyes. And the way that people in the Bible times would have been seeing things. But I shared this last week, I'm going to share it again this morning. It says, the Hebrew understanding of the heart included the emotions, but also involved the mind, the conscience, and the will. It means everything that is going on inside of you. All the men and women whom God chose to use greatly had weaknesses and made mistakes. We all know what. None of us are what? Perfect. None of us are perfect. But in spite of that, but God saw their potential if only their hearts would turn towards Him. It is your heart that matters. It's the heart that makes the difference. And I shared this in previous messages talking about David, and I'm sharing it again today because I think it's a very good thing to remember. I said, so remember this. When you invite God into your life, He cancels the liabilities of your past and rewrites your future. Can you understand that? God has the power and the ability to do that. To cancel the liabilities of your past and to rewrite your future. But you must choose what He has chosen for you. And as He pursues your heart, you must pursue His heart. And that's precisely the difference between Saul and David. And that's what we're going to find out as we continue to look at the life of David, the difference between them. And I've shared, when we were talking about Saul, we read this about Saul, but we're also using this as our basis about God's heart quest because it tells us about it. In 1 Samuel chapter 13, verse 14, we've been reading this verse quite a bit over the last little while, but it says this, but now your kingdom must end. Who was Samuel talking to? He was talking to Saul, telling Saul your kingdom must end. Because why? For the Lord has sought out a man after His own heart. God is what? God is on a heart quest. He's looking, He's searching what? For someone whose heart is pursuing His heart. And it says the Lord has already appointed him to be the leader of His people because you have not kept the Lord's command. And we already talked about Saul. We know God changed Saul. God gave Saul a new heart, but because Saul decided to keep on being Saul, because Saul got too big for his britches, he found himself in a place that God was taking the Spirit off of him. And this is one of the starting points here. This wasn't the first point, but this is one of the starting points here, where Saul began to just think more about himself than God. Hence, when this happened, Samuel told Saul, the Lord has sought out a man after His own heart, and basically saying, and you ain't him. It isn't you. It could have been, but it's not anymore. And amazing, God gave Saul chances later on to try to change it, but Saul refused because it came all about Saul. And again, as we know, he was talking about David. And we know this because we also read almost 1,000 years after this is said to Saul, and what is even said about David, when Samuel first anoints him. We read this in Acts chapter 13, verse 22. But God removed Saul. So who removed him? God removed Saul and replaced him with David, a man about whom God said, I have found David, son of Jesse, what? A man after my own heart. And again, I always says, why does he say that? Because he says that, and he clarifies it by what he says right after that. He will do everything. How much? He will do everything I want him to do. And again, we know David was not perfect. And as we go through this, looking at David again, you will find out David was not perfect. But that does not change the fact that God knew that when He spoke to David, David's heart was so in tune with God's heart, even if David was going the wrong way, he would stop immediately in his tracks and realize, you know what? I messed up. You're right, God. See, that's the thing. He realized what? He said, God, you're what? You're right. Too many times, what do? We read the Word of God, and if it says something we don't like, we sit there and say, well, I don't know. you're on dangerous ground as soon as you do that. When you see that, you just say, God, as soon as you see that, and you know something different you like, you say, God, you know what, you're right. You know what, God, you're right. You know what, God, you're right. Because if we take on any other thought process besides that, we're beginning to go in an area or the way of Saul, we can find ourselves in trouble. So as we know, God is looking for someone who's searching for his heart. And I've said this time and time again, that any time God describes someone as a man after his own heart, we need to study them carefully. And again, we need to strive to have God say that about us also. I want God to say about me. I know we're going to be talking, we are talking about David, the King David, and hence, my namesake, so I am biased towards him. I do like David. He's the youngest of his, I'm the youngest of mine. So I see a lot of correlation here. I just don't want to go the route of Bathsheba.
Praise the Lord.
Yeah, let's go on. But let us strive to have God declare this about us. How important is our heart in serving God and pursuing God? Now we ended the message with this last week, and we read in Jeremiah 29:13. It says, "And you will seek and find me when you search for me with all your heart." So when we search with him with all of our heart, then we will seek him, and then we will find him. Because again, unless our heart's pursuing him, we're not going to seek him.
That's right.
Unless we're seeking him, guess what? We're not going to find him.
That's right.
But we're truly not going to seek him unless we try to align our heart to his heart. See, see how it all just sort of goes there. So again, we want to look at this one that the Bible talks about, pursuing the heart of God, where God himself said, this is the one who's pursuing my heart. He's a man after my own heart. And today I'm going to probably share one of the best known Bible stories there are. You've probably heard, if you don't know the whole story, you've at least heard of the title of it, which is what? David and Goliath. Probably one of the best known Bible stories there is. I mean, people who haven't even been raised in church have heard of David and Goliath, because it's like, for instance, back in the late 80s and early 90s, well, I should say during the 80s and the early 90s in the NFL, the NFC dominated. I mean, they dominated the Super Bowl. The Bills in the late 80s and early 90s was the most dominant team in the AFC. They went to 4 straight Super Bowls. Buffalo Bills did. But they lost 4 straight times. Oh, went out again? But they lost 4 straight times. Probably because I have this thing set up on here. But they lost 4 straight times because they faced an NFC team that was just that much more dominant. The first Super Bowl, the first one they were in was the closest one. They lost by a point. After that, they got clobbered. I mean, they literally got clobbered. They got hammered. I mean, it wasn't even a contest. And most of the football, most of the Super Bowls during that time period, the NFC just really, they clobbered them. So it truly was a David versus Goliath. So anytime you see a true underdog going against a force that's considered so much greater, they consider it they call it to this day a David and Goliath matchup, because it's a matchup of the impossible. Basically it's just from all thought process, it can't happen. You're going to lose. You're going to lose. You're going to lose. This someone's going to win because they're Goliath and you're David. But hence why we have this story in the Bible called, this thing that tells about this guy named Goliath and this one named David. We begin to get introduced to him again, sort of how he is. So this is one of my favorite stories. It's probably, like I said, one of the best known stories in the Bible. So it's found in 1 Samuel chapter 17. We're going to do a lot of Bible verses today. I'm not going to be reading the whole thing. There's going to be a lot there. Have a little bit of commentary to go along with it. But I think there's a lot we can learn about it, because especially us, we're celebrating this Tuesday, the independence of our country. And how do you know? On paper, or if you looked at the thought, if you would have been here over 200 years ago thinking about breaking away from England, you'd have to be nuts. You'd be crazy, because England was the world power of the day. They were the Goliath of the day. Everywhere where they went, they conquered. Fact is, it used to be said of the British Empire, the sun never set on the British Empire. They had some type of colony across the world in every single time zone. So the British Empire always had the sun shining on it. That was a phrase you say, that the sun never sets on the British Empire. And here's this little peep-squeak country which just has a bunch of farmers and all this stuff. That's mainly what we were. Or, you know, just farmers and just peasants and all that. And we stood up against the most powerful nation on the planet at the time. And we won our independence. The nation faced a David and Goliath scenario. So this message does go along with really what we're talking about today, about celebrating independence, about realizing you're celebrating independence as a country, that we ourselves, our nation, was a David and Goliath story. And the difference was, again, as we showed the beginning video, when we talked about everything he said, we need to understand our pledge. And what does it say? One nation. What? Under God. Without the Lord God Almighty, we wouldn't be where we are, and our nation wouldn't be where it is.
That's right.
Even though our nation's walking away, the bottom line is that the United States has become who it is because of the Lord God Almighty. And then we're in trouble today when we truly walk away from it. And that's the danger right now. But that's another subject for another time. But I sort of wanted to sort of relate it to you how we can look at it today, how we fit into the story as a nation. You too, as I get later on, I'm going to tell you how you too can fit into this story. Well, we read in 1 Samuel chapter 17, verses 1 through 3, it says, the Philistines now mustered their army for battle and camped between Socoh in Judah and Azekah, I've been practicing this, Azekah and Ephes-dammim. Saul countered by gathering his Israelite troops near the valley of Elah. So the Philistines and Israelites faced each other on opposite hills with the valley in between. Literally, their armies were just, there was a little valley in between them. One was on one hill, one was on another. If you've ever been to Israel, if you've ever been to
It's a little.
they're not even big hills.
No.
We had a chance to go there when we were there, and we actually went down to where they figured the brook was, and I forgot, I should have grabbed them today, I would have brought them. We actually picked up stones from down in that area. And here's the thing, there's a very good likelihood. Some of those stones we picked up, I don't want to say those stones we picked up were from that time. How long does rock last, folks? You set a stone down, it's going to be there a while. You know what I'm saying? So odds are, you know, we were picking up stones that were actually there on that battlefield on that day when this was going on. But they were there. And I had heard this conversation. It wasn't so long ago that the Philistines were soundly beaten before Israel. And they would have been totally routed if Saul's rashness had not prevented it. But here they are. They're there to make trouble again. Saul, again, so remember, Saul started out right, but Saul, when he began to think more of himself than he should have, he found himself in a place where he made a foolish vow. And it stopped the complete destruction of the Philistines because his son Jonathan went out in the name of the Lord saying, hey, maybe the Lord's going to bless us. I'm going to go out. He tells his armor bearer, well, let's go do this. Let's go pick a fight with them. And depending how they respond, we'll know that the Lord is sending us this way. And sure enough, Jonathan gets a sign that he was looking for, that God was with him. And Jonathan, his armor bearer, goes in and begins to hit two guys, begin to attack a garrison of Philistine soldiers. And they beat them. Then all of a sudden it begins to spread through the land of Israel that the Philistines are on the run, and Saul musters the army together and begins to chase them. They begin to destroy the Philistines, but Saul makes a stupid vow that day. He says, cursed be anyone if they're going to die if they eat anything before I get vengeance on my enemy. And Jonathan, not hearing his dad's curse, you know, they're chasing them and they're beating them pretty bad. And the men, because they can't refresh themselves, become weary and can't finish chasing the Philistines. But Jonathan, during the battle, he dips his spear in some honey, puts it to his mouth, and he's refreshed. And then the people said, Jonathan shouldn't have done it. Your dad said anybody does it going to die. And Jonathan said, well, let it be what's going to be, basically. And he just keeps it. He said, but my dad made a foolish gesture. He said, if you would have done that. He said, see how refreshed I am? That's what you guys would have been too. So when the battle finally ended, because the men couldn't go any further, They couldn't go along anymore. They just worn out. When it gets back to Saul, Saul being, well, it's because I said it. He was going to kill his own son. And said the people spared Jonathan's life that day and saved him from Saul. See, that's when Saul began getting too big for his britches. I wasn't planning on going there, but I guess I just need to sort of share that with you. So here's an enemy that he could have completely destroyed, but because of his foolishness, here they are again. Notice how they defy Israel with their armies. They set up camp in a place which belongs to Judah, which belongs to Israel. It's Israel's ground. And this never would have happened if Israel had stayed faithful to their God. If their king would have stayed faithful to his God. And it's also possible that maybe the Philistines heard that Samuel had a falling out with Saul. Because this is after when we hear that, first of all, what we read earlier, about, your kingdom must end. And then later on after that, that's where we hear where the Spirit of the Lord, God took the spirit off of Saul and what gave him an evil spirit. And it could be that the Philistines may have even heard about that and said, since Samuel's no longer with him, since Samuel's no longer really assisting him, let's go and see what we can do. Let's go try to recapture some of this land. Because before this time, before Samuel and before Saul, the Philistines were many times the rulers of Israel. They would go in and they would make the Israelites slaves of theirs and make them be servants of theirs. So this is the situation that we're faced with. So we have the two enemies, the two armies side by side. But then we read in verse 4 through 7, it says this. It says, Then Goliath, a Philistine champion from Gath, came out of the Philistine ranks and faced the forces of Israel. He was over 9 feet tall. And a lot of people say, I don't know how much about the measurements in the Bible. I get amazed at how many times people say, well, I just don't know about what the Bible says. That, I think they're exaggerating. And every time that they begin to say that, they make archaeological discoveries that show that the Bible's true. They try to talk, well, there's really no record of this. They talk about David. Like, David didn't really exist as a king. And then when they were really trying to push that issue, just saying, it's just folklore, it's sort of like folklore. It's just, an idea of sort of like Camelot, like King Arthur. It's someone for them to sort of try to mimic to be as. What do? They unearth the gatepost of a city in northern Israel that has been buried under, and stamped on the gatepost is stamped by the king, the son of David. So for a fictional character, I like to know why don't we give a fictional character the credit for something that you set up. So when we read this here, a lot of times we just think the Bible is exaggerating things. Well, the Bible talks about dragons and all that kind of stuff. large things. But here it says he was over 9 feet tall. He wore a bronze helmet. He had a bronze coat of mail that weighed 125 pounds. He wore a chainmail that weighed 125 pounds. He also wore bronze leg armor, and he carried a bronze javelin on his shoulder. He had a shaft of his spear was as heavy and as thick as a weaver's beam. I looked that up. That's roughly about 2.5 inches around. The staff of his spear. It was tipped with an iron spearhead that weighed 15 pounds. Just so Sandy left me a 15-pound weight at home. This is what was on the end of his spear, Rama. That's what he carried around and felt like a twig to him. This was on the end of his spear. This is what he would thrust into people and throw through the air. Anybody want to throw 15 pounds feels like just on the end of a spear?
No, sir.
I want to hold it there a little bit for you because it's got a little weight. 15 pounds. This is something that he would hurl through the air to go through people. He had the ability and the strength to do that. Talk about a big dude. In fact, I was just watching a program. I taped the program the other day, and I was showing Wanda. She hasn't watched the whole thing yet. But in the Bible, there's also an account where it talks about how Goliath's spear was with the Ark of the Covenant. There's this gentleman who actually claims that in Jerusalem he found the Ark of the Covenant. The Jewish government knows about all this stuff. The bottom line, the reason why they haven't brought any of it out is simply because of what do? They don't have a temple to put it in. So why pull it out of where it is when you can't do it? In fact, there's others who went in there unauthorized from this, except this one guy. They all died. And they actually sent this guy in to pull him out. I mean, all this is part of public record there, of what I heard. And then he was talking about how the guy who went in there, when he found what was in the furnishings of the temple, it says in there later on in Samuel that David gave his kingdom, the sword of Goliath to one of the priests. And the guy made a replica of what the sword of Goliath looked like. And I'm telling you, I showed it to Wanda the other day on the video. That thing was big. 62 inches long. His sword, 62 inches long. What they saw. I mean, it's huge. The sword of Goliath was 62 inches long. And it was a very unique looking sword, the one that they had. But again, it's nothing. Again, I just want to tell you, people think this stuff is, Goliath was a big dude. And if you saw the size of the sword that they had on there, it was, I mean, just the handle of the thing was probably bigger around one of the ends of these. Huge. And 62 inches long. So you're talking about 5 feet 2 inches long. That's a big sword. And it says, and his armor bearer walked ahead of him carrying a shield. And I said, what an imposing man and enemy. So just imagine seeing this dude. So many of us have seen some of the basketball players, that, the one guy I'm trying to remember his name. The one basketball player from Kenya or Nairobi or something like that. He was like almost 8 foot tall, but he was about this big. I mean, his knees were bigger than his legs. Y'all remember who I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do.
There are some players like that. But then you have a guy like Shaq, who's a big dude. I mean, he's a tall dude, but he's a big dude. I mean, just recently I saw a picture of him, standing next to like one of the morning news hosts. She came up to his waist. I mean, she wasn't that tall of a woman, but definitely made him look like a giant. I said, David Goliath. If you ever seen the picture like Kevin Hart and Shaq, you think David Goliath. Okay? So Goliath, he's this imposing fort, this imposing thing. And here's what we continue to read. It says, and Goliath stood and shouted a taunt across to the Israelites. Why are you all coming out to fight? Why are all of you coming out here? He says, I'm the Philistine champion, but you are only the servants of Saul. Choose one man to come down here and fight me. If he kills me, we'll become your slaves. If I kill him, you will be our slaves. I defy the armies of Israel today. Send me a man who will fight me. When Saul and the Israelites heard this, they were terrified and deeply shaken. I'm going to say something about that here in a second. And in verse 16 it says, for 40 days, every morning and evening, the Philistine champion strutted in front of the Israelite army. See, the Philistines defied Israel with their champion Goliath, whom they were almost as proud of as he was proud of himself, hoping that maybe through him that they would be able to recover some of their territory and make the Israelites slaves again. It could be that perhaps the army of the Israelites may have been superior in number and strength, that the Philistines decided to have Goliath go out there, that they were reluctant to go in battle because maybe their army wasn't as big. We read earlier how it said they mustered an army. When you use the term muster, what does that usually mean? You're trying to pull from everywhere to make something. So they figured maybe what we'll do, we'll issue this challenge with our champion, because if you see this guy, he's unbeatable. So we'll sort of put it out, let's see if someone's stupid, because the thing is, stuff was, many times, in old times, a lot of people did things by honor. So in other words, if a person went out there and says, well, if you do this, then everything I have is yours, that meant their family and everything else. So if all of a sudden that happened, no one else had to say anything. They were to honor the words of that person who had that position. So they knew that if they were to do this, that all of a sudden with this one single fight, they could gain control of all of Israel. So Goliath, he's taunting all of this stuff. In fact, we read in verses 24 through 21 through 24, it says, "Soon the Israelites and the Philistines forces faced each other, army against army, and David left his things and with the keeper of supplies and hurried out to the ranks to meet his brothers. And as he was talking with them, Goliath, the Philistine champion from Gath, came out from the Philistine ranks, and then David heard him shout his usual taunt to the army of Israel. And as soon as Israelites' army saw him, they began to run away in fright." So now it's got to the point, as soon as they began to see him, they ran away. And he did this morning and evening. He did it in the morning and then at night. Just taunting them. And it got to the point that as soon as they saw him, they ran. Now again, here's the thing. Let's think about it. If by some odd chance, if their army was truly a lot larger in number, the thing that goes through my mind, why didn't a whole bunch of them just jump on this guy and take him out? We learned that in World War II. Germany had a lot better tanks than we had. They had a thing out there called the King Tiger. The stuff we had, you'd shoot at it, was like shooting a pea shooter at a block wall. Taking a paper spitball and shooting it at a block. I mean, twing, twing, twing. The best they could do is try to get behind it to the weak spot, but they'd have to get behind it first and get behind those columns, taking it from the front, fat chance. And plus, they could shoot and kill us before we've got range where our guns could take them out. But we learned that all of a sudden, if we threw like 50 Sherman tanks at one Tiger tank, guess what? It only has so many shells, it can shoot so many things. It was just overwhelming numbers. Same thing could have happened here. But these dudes, they allowed this guy to get so in their mind that they forgot that they could work as a group, which needs to be something we need to think about. And realize this. But also, when we hear this, they run in fear. And I said, just look at the terror they struck Israel. As soon as they saw it, they ran in fear. See, Israelites' army would not have been afraid, but they noticed that King Saul's courage failed him. Their king, the one that they were following into battle, the one that they would say, oh, he looks like a king. They saw him, he wasn't anxious to go out and do it. This same guy who went before, when the Spirit of the Lord would come mightily upon him, there wasn't an enemy that would not stand before him. He'd go against them. But all of a sudden now he finds himself in a place where he no longer has the Spirit of God upon him. So all of a sudden now he's afraid, and hence everyone who's following him now is afraid. But when David hears this, something begins to stir inside of David. Verse 26 tells us, and David asked the soldier standing nearby, "What will a man get for killing this Philistine and ending his defiance of Israel? Who is this pagan Philistine anyway, that he is allowed to defy the armies of the living God?" See, the difference is, Goliath, when he was talking about Israel, he said, well, I defy the armies of Israel this day. I defy the armies of Israel this day. But David says something else. He still says of the armies of Israel. What does he say? Defies the armies of what? Of who? Of the living God. See, a righteous anger began to just well up within and stir within David. And he became mad because ultimately Goliath wasn't just cursing Israel. He was ultimately what? Cursing and defying who? God. And David took offense to this, and a righteous boldness came over him. Because here's what we read in verses 32 to 33. It says, "Don't worry about this Philistine," David told Saul. So David goes to the king. The news gets to him. And David says, "Don't worry about this Philistine. I'll go fight him." And then, "Don't be ridiculous," Saul replied. "There is no way you can face this Philistine and possibly win. You are only a boy, and he's been a man of war since his youth." So again, hence why we get the story, David and Goliath here. Because from the natural mindset, it seemed Ridiculous. But I want you to listen to David's reply. But David persisted. I have been taking care of my father's sheep and goats, he said, when a lion and a bear comes to steal a lamb from the flock. I go after it with a club. I don't think so. I'm going to know God's with me if I'm going to do that. Who's here ready to take the club and go after a lion and a bear? Raise your hand. You better know God's with you. You're going to do that stuff. See, something you understand is, while this is going on here, earlier, what we read earlier in Samuel, that David was anointed as king, and what happened? The Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him. See, that's what we need to understand about a lot of things. When we come to the Lord, what happens? The Spirit of the Lord comes mightily upon us. Hence why we can break free from things of sin and addictions and everything else. When we truly rely upon Him, because it is not us who do it, it is He who does it through His anointing and His Holy Spirit.
Amen.
I have been taking care of my father's sheep and goats, he said, and when a lion and bear comes to steal the lamb from the flock, I go after it with a club and rescue the lamb from its mouth. Now listen, he gets it out of the mouth, and then he says, if the animal turns on me, I catch it by the jaw. He goes after the most dangerous part of it. I catch it by the jaw and club it to death. Wow. I've always told somebody, have you ever had a dog come after attack and bite you? Best thing you can do is go after it's trying to bite you, take your arm, jam it back into its mouth. Because if you jam its jaws open, it can't bite. And take its head and shove it towards you. Huh?
Bite it back.
Well, you get in that, before you get into that place, and then you can do something. But it goes to make sense. Because if you can stop its jaws from coming down, it can't do as much damage. So he go grab it by the jaw and he pulled it. He says, I have done it with both lions and bears. See, he said a lion. See, but now it seems like he may have done this on numerous occasions. I've done it with lions and bears, and I will do the same to this pagan Philistine too, for he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the claws of the lion and the bear will rescue me from this Philistine. Saul finally conceded, all right, and go, he said, and may the Lord be with you. But the key to David's battle plan, is found in verse 37. The Lord who rescued me, he says, the Lord who rescued me from the claws of the lion and the bear will rescue me from this Philistine. See, David already saw the victory. Because he realized who his God is. You know, you probably figured because it's an old story, I probably said God was. No, God is.
Amen.
Because He's not a has-been God.
That's right.
He's a right now God.
Yes.
He's a future God. He is the God of the past, He's the God of now, and He's the God of the future. Verse 40 says, he picked up 5 smooth stones from a stream and put them into his shepherd's bag. Then armed only with his shepherd's staff and a sling. I mean, honestly, you really have to. I mean, because maybe we've heard the story, so we know the outcome, but you really need to look at it. Just really look at it. And what I'm saying here, armed with only a shepherd's staff and a sling, he starts across the valley to fight the Philistine. I'm like, David is crazy. He's whacked, man. He's out of his mind. But I mean, think about it. In all practicality, he's lost his mind. Am I right? But David knew and experienced the awesome deliverance and power of God in his life already. So in his mind, Goliath didn't stand a chance.
That's right.
See, David didn't see this big huge thing up there. He may have saw this large giant, but behind that giant, or behind him, he saw God who was so much bigger. That he realized that Goliath will look even smaller to God than he did to Goliath. Goliath would be like a gnat looking at us.
God. But sometimes God just needs some people who are crazy with faith. Then we'll continue to read. It says, and Goliath walked out towards David with his armor bearer ahead of him, sneering in contempt at this ruddy-faced boy. Am I a dog, he roared at David, that you come at me with a stick? And he cursed David by the names of his God. All of a sudden now, every curse word you can think of, he began to hurl at this guy. You stupid blank me, blank, 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 the blank, 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 the blank, 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 blank. In the name of Dagon, you know. And on top of it, blank, 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 blank. Blank. Come over here. And I'll give your flesh to the birds and wild animals, Goliath yelled. Huh. See, he realized all of his taunts earlier, all of his threats earlier, made a whole army run. He figured if I just keep it up just a little bit more, this little pipsqueak, he's going to turn around and hightail it away. But when he realized I'm going to come down and I'm going to fillet him like a little fish, he can turn and run. He may think he's big and bad now, but when he sees me start to move, he's going to back up. That's what he thought. I guarantee. And if he thought, well, if he's foolish enough, it's an appetizer before the main course. But David replied to the Philistine, you come to me with a sword and a spear and a javelin, but I come to you named the Lord of heaven's armies, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. See, David gets to the point, he realizes, Goliath, you realize something. Yeah, you're taunting at Saul, and you're taunting at the armies of Israel, but I'm here to tell you, that's not the real one you're taunting against. You're taunting against the one that's behind him. You're picking on the God of the universe, and that's the one you're truly defying today. That's the one you're saying that you're bigger than today. That's the one you're saying that you could beat with no problem today. And he says, today the Lord will conquer. Who will? See, folks, that's where we need to get. And understand it's the Lord who wins the battle. It's the Lord who wins the battle. I'm trying to be very, very aware of the time. Today the Lord will conquer you, and I will kill you. See, first it's the Lord will conquer you, but the Lord's going to get you to a place where I'm going to take you out. The Lord will conquer you, and I will kill you and cut off your head. And then I will give the dead bodies of your men to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. See, it's got an exclamation point. See, I can say, David's not sitting there saying, well, you know, this is what I sort of heard in Moses talking about this. He's saying, dude, you need to understand something. See, there was a boldness that was on him. He shouts this back at Goliath. And he says, and everyone assembled here will know that the Lord rescues his people, but not with sword and spear, with a stick and a stone. You know, he doesn't say that there, but that's basically going to be him. You know, stick and stone may break my bones. Yeah. You're breaking my bones right here. This is the Lord's battle. And he will give you to us. See, David sees the situation for what it really is. It's not about King Saul. It's not about the Israelite army or even himself. But it's about defiance towards God and his glory and power. For David declared, this is the Lord's battle. That's where we need to get many, many times. I don't care what the doctor tells you. I don't care what someone in the world or someone else, what the situation may be declaring to you. You need to understand if you're a child of the living God, you have been anointed with his blessed Holy Spirit, and you are redeemed by the blood of Jesus Christ. It is the Lord's battle. We need to get our eyes off the circumstance and get our eyes back on the God who's bigger than the circumstance. Yes. That's what this whole story is about. And it says, as Goliath moved closer to attack, David quickly ran out to meet him. Reaching into his shepherd's bag and taking out a stone, he hurled it with his sling and hit the Philistine in the forehead. The stone sank in. That's a force, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've actually watched programs where have you ever watched some of the stuff where they've shown this stuff?
Mhm.
And they measured the amount of force, and they said definitely that using the type of sling of that day, they had a guy from the Middle East who was an expert sling at this, and they had this thing set about the height of what Goliath would be. And they had him do what he would do and swing this thing and the pressure that we had. They actually did test this. They said if it didn't go in, it would definitely hit him hard enough to incapacitate him, to almost knock him out. See, because it wasn't, I want you to understand, it wasn't the stone that killed Goliath.
That's right.
We'll get there. Hold on a second. The stone sank in, and Goliath stumbled and fell face down on the ground. So David triumphed over the Philistine with only a sling and a stone, for he had no sword. Then David ran over and pulled Goliath's sheath, and David used it to kill him and cut off his head.
That's right.
So David used Goliath's own sword to kill him. See, the stone was used to take him down. So in other words now, instead of him looking down on David, David's now looking down on him. See, God's able to knock the enemy down.
Right.
We're no longer looking up, we're looking down. And it's not us doing it, it's Him. And we can do it.
Amen.
And what He does, we can take the final stroke and take care of that thing. So David used it to kill him and cut off his head. And when the Philistines saw that their champion was dead, they turned and ran. Oh, they were feeling real big and comfortable a while ago. They turned and ran. And as the story goes and tells us what happened was all of a sudden now courage gets a hold of the armies of Israel. And they go, yeah, let's go, boys! It's amazing. It's amazing. It's amazing how brave they got all of a sudden. But seriously though, they needed to see a leader or a person who was not afraid of the enemy to encourage them to engage in battle and spur them to victory. See, many times me as your pastor, I try to, many things, I don't look at anything in life as overwhelming. I really don't. You can ask Wanda, I just usually don't let things bother me. Whatever the diagnosis is, whatever the declaration is or whatever, I don't let it bother me because I know who God is. And I've simply made up my mind, well, Lord, you're God. You're either going to deliver the situation and declare your power and might like never before, or if not, we're going to learn something from this. But either way, I'm going to give you praise and glory and honor. It's realizing that, but I realize He's in control. So why should I fret? I realize I'm the apple of His eye. I realize He has good plan for me. Good plan for me that works according to what He desires, not always what I desire. But I begin to realize, the older I get, the more I realize what I want isn't necessarily the best, but what He wants is always best. What He decides to do is always the proper thing. It's always the correct thing. So you know what? I just need to get along with His program. And that's why I'm certain things. I try not to worry and fret about things. Because again, I understand God's God. And He has it. If He doesn't have it, you know what? We need to go find someone else to worship. Either God can take care of this or He's not the God the Bible says He is. Says David, I try to be that leader that you look at that just trust Him. Just not me, trust Him. And realize that God, He's God. And in closing, I ask this question. Why was David able to defeat an enemy like Goliath? Why was it? It all goes back to what we started this whole thing out with. Yes, we know he had unwavering faith. He had this awesome faith in who God is, but why? Why did he have that kind of faith in God? What did that verse in Jeremiah tell us? And you will seek me and find me, and you search for me with all your heart. See, David, why was David able to defeat the enemy like Goliath? Because he had a heart that pursued God's heart. See, his pursuit allowed his faith to grow like never before. His pursuit of God's heart allowed his faith to be explodingly large. To just see who God is. And because of that, he saw the potential, what his faith and trust in God could and would do. He saw God bigger and more capable to deliver him than the bigness of the situation to defeat him. Whether or not you're going to be victorious in the walk with God really determines how you view God. Whether or not you're going to be victorious in trials and tribulations come your way is going to really determine how you view God, how big you view God. Because if you don't think he can do it, even though he can, he's not going to go against your wishes. He was able to do this because he knew that God was bigger. So no matter your situation, the problem you're facing, God is bigger and stronger than it. See, with human understanding and perception, David was fighting a hopeless and impossible battle. In the world's mind, he was on a suicide mission. But with David's heart pursuit of God, he saw who was truly in charge. And that's why Paul, here's another great man of God, Paul could write what he did in 1 Corinthians 15, verses 57 through 58. You can just play that music. It's very soft in the background. Here's what Paul writes to the Corinth church. And he's writing this after he talks about us being transformed, where the mortal puts on immortality, where the corruptible puts on incorruption. See, because they were, you can turn it down just a little more. Or if they're facing problems, help them understand that this is what's awaiting you. This is the glory that's awaiting you. Death and sin are defeated. He declares that to him. He says, so don't worry about this stuff. Don't worry about this. So he tells us, he ends this chapter, he says, but thank God, he gives us victory over sin and death. Through who? Through our Lord Jesus Christ. And because of this, my dear brothers and sisters, be strong and immovable. Always work enthusiastically for the Lord, for you know that nothing you do for the Lord is ever useless. Why can we go against an enemy that seems so big, so terrifying? Why is it we can, even when the doctor gives us a diagnosis that is the worst thing that we could ever get, why is it we can still have hope? Because Jesus won the victory. And we know that nothing we ever do for him is ever useless. It is never done in vain. We can go to our last breath realizing that God is faithful. And he will see us through, because ultimately, as we've been talking about, heaven is our ultimate goal. It's all about heaven, folks. It's all about heaven. And the only way we're going to get there, we're going to get to God, is by pursuing with all of our heart. By us taking up God's heart pursuits by pursuing his heart. See, God is looking for hearts. You already said it. He's looking for a person after his own heart. And if we pursue his heart the way he's pursuing ours, there is nothing that is impossible in our lives. Because it's not you doing it, Roma. It's not you doing it, Yvonne. But it's the Lord God Almighty doing it for his honor and for his glory. Now, I'm not giving you a blank check because all this lines up with whether or not you're pursuing his heart. Because if you're pursuing his heart, you're not thinking about selfish things. You're not thinking about, oh, what benefits me. It's what benefits him. It's what brings honor and glory to him. See, that's where David was. How is this? This is going to bring glory to God. It wasn't about bringing glory to David. But it's about defending the Lord God Almighty. God could have done it himself, but he needed someone. See, Saul should have been the man to stand up and say, hey, the God anointed me, and because he anointed me, I can go out and face this punk and take him out. Now, getting to understand, I know Saul wasn't as big as Goliath, but Saul was the biggest guy in Israel. And God anointed him with power, but because of his stubbornness and pig-headedness, he lost it. But I still believe that somehow some of you would have realized, the way that God's power would have if only he would do it once again. I know I can take this guy. And we could possibly be reading a different story of Saul if only he would have realized it. But it had to take some young kid who realized with God's anointing on what could happen, that he went out and conquered what seemed to be an impossibility. And God offers that same thing to you and me. He offers it to you and me. But our heart must pursue his heart. Our heart must pursue his heart. Please stand. Turn it up a little bit for me now. I'm actually having to restart that song in a second. This song says God is here. His one is to perform. But we need to understand that God is bigger than anything. And sometimes you just have to be crazy enough to realize, God, I know this seems so whacked and impossible. But you know what? I believe. Who's crazy enough to believe like David believed? That no matter what the situation is, God's able to deliver. And if that's you, I want to tell you, you can find encouragement and strength at this altar today for the time that's ahead, and realize that God truly is bigger. He is bigger. But there's times we got to get this stuff over God. It's about him. Amen. It's about pursuing his heart. It's about pursuing his heart. So I don't know about you, as this song starts again, if you just want to spend some time seeking God and say, Lord, thank you for the example you gave us through David. Let me truly have that kind of courage and faith like never before. Let me pursue your heart. Let it be said of me as you said of him. I am a person after your own heart, because I'll do everything. I'll do everything you tell me to do. Lord, I'm going to strive from this moment forward to trust you like never before, to be obedient like never before. I want to pursue your heart with my heart. If that's you, slip out from where you are and make your way over there. Just begin to talk with the Lord there. My soul and mind, God of miracles, God of the impossible is here. I want to tell you, the song says God is here today. But it's up to you. You have to be the one to move. I can't move for you. Listen to what it says. God is here.